This is a really interesting thread by Mark Kern, who talks about warfare language, information warfare, etc. And I thought it'd be really interesting to pull up what he was talking about, go through his thread, and then highlight some ideas from some other people, as well as a tweet I have. So let's just start with what Mark Kern is saying, right? If you're not familiar, he's a team lead for Vanilla World of Warcraft, and he's very much active in the culture war. He said, "Over a week ago, I made the statement that we are in an information civil war between ideologies, where one side was already shooting and the other side didn't even realize the war had started. I pointed out the left is very good at nicknames and branding, which is the equivalent of carpet bombing in an information war. Indiscriminate and brutal snatching up of broad swaths of innocent civilians, Nazi, alt-righter, bigot, etc. are applied with a broad brush. Meanwhile, the other side, aside from POTOs, I don't know what that is, very effective nickname branding seems to be largely dormant." I think he was talking about POTUS. I think he's talking about Trump. Trump is really good at branding people. Not realizing the conflict had already arrived, they mistakenly believe that no real harm will be done until the shooting starts, so they lag behind. He says that he suggested that branding and nicknaming needed to improve in order to match the side that is already bombing everyone. He suggested SJW was an abstract, even positive term that served no useful purpose in the information battle. He called for suggestions for alternative names, and this is where it gets interesting. Many suggestions missed the point. They were abstract or required the reader to already have knowledge of the situation to appreciate, were too mired in humor, or simply not punitive enough. Then one suggested social terrorist. He says, "To me, this was the perfect term, easily digestible to the masses and derogatory enough while accurately painting their tactics. Social identifies the group clearly are linked to SJWs, while terrorist highlights and blasts their hateful tactics in a social setting. The people who were not aware they were in a war yet complained the term was too hyperbolic, too violent to be used. Well, use it or lose it. Your enemy has no problem calling you that and far worse. Yesterday, he says, he was proved right. A Wired article called everyone posting online in support of the president or Kavanaugh information terrorists. He says he called it. They just outbranded you again. Everyone else will continue to lose the information war until you are ready to use words and push back." He said, "So wake up, the war is now, fought over information and economics. It won't be a shooting war. Even if it becomes one, you will have lost the war far before then, as your communications are cut off, your payment processors and jobs are revoked, and you're erased from the internet." He says, "Fight with information. Use all your words and your freedom of speech while you have it as weapons. Conservative techs, wake up. Create alternative structures for communications, payment, and search. Don't wait for physical warfare in an information age. You are already behind." He makes a really good point about the information age. We're in an era where we don't really need bullets to win wars. I was thinking about this a while ago. What's the point of a war? Well, in some circumstances, I think in many, it's to control some kind of resource. You have some areas where they want to control land, maybe it's spices, maybe it's just access to a waterway or something. All of these things are something that somebody wants or needs. We're in an information war in that if you conquer a people, if you send a boatload of soldiers to a foreign land and point guns at them and say, do this or else, you have oppressed this people and you have convinced them to serve you in some way. Perhaps now the resources they mine or produce, you will get a piece of. You will now have access to the land, and you'll have access to whatever resource it is you wanted. There's other reasons for war. Some people go to war simply for ideological reasons, for sure. But let's say, in today's day and age, we've got China, hacking the US, we've got Russian interference, the US does the same thing, and other countries are all doing the same thing. If we want to win a resource from China, let's use like rare earths, for example. China has the majority of the rare earths we need for computers and technology. Well, what if China at one point says, we're not going to give you any? No more smartphones or cell phones for you. We can go in by force and take it from them, and that's difficult, or we can just convince them to give it up. And that's the thing about an information war. There is no need to send an army to conquer a land if you only need convince the people in that land to support you anyway. And now you've got people, Trump supporters wearing shirts that say they would rather be Russians than Democrats. I'm not saying the Russians made that happen. That's certainly one of the accusations, and it may or may not be true. I don't know. I'm just saying. The point is, in an information war, there doesn't need to be a gunshot. And that's why I've talked repeatedly about the cold civil war. Months ago, I made a podcast where I said, I think we're in the civil war. We've seen street battles, but we don't need the kind of conflict we saw in the past Because all that needs to happen is a war of ideas. You need to win support. Right now, the lines are drawn very heavily. The left and the right are split, more so than at any time in the past, maybe 50 years. I don't know. I'm pulling that number, but according to the Pew Research poll, at least in 1994, everybody was really close together. Obviously, we did have a civil war at some point. The issue is, Mark Kern is right. You've got people. This is what I explained to people at MythCon. You are competing. You are at war with people who have no rules. You're literally up against Heath Ledger's Joker, okay? And you have rules. And I'm not saying this is a left or right thing. I'm saying that where I stand, what I believe in, is rules and principles. And that means there are things I'm not willing to do. And this means I am at a massive disadvantage, and I might actually lose. My values might cease to exist at some point because my unwillingness to compromise and violate my core principles. But you look at these stories, where I'll give you a good example. Vice News embeds with the Unite the Right people, Chris Cantwell, for 3 days. They go to his hotel room. They just let him talk. They don't challenge him. They film him doing his thing. They won 4 Emmys. They won a Peabody Award. And I say, bravo, motherfuckers, good job. Because these people, the illiberal reactionaries, whatever they are saying that platforming is wrong and you shouldn't do it. Well, many of these people were silent when Vice wins the award for Charlottesville. Many of them actually supported it. And I said, that's really interesting that you can look at forums like r/anarchism cheering for Vice having platformed this man when they typically complain about me platforming individuals when I've done interviews with some of these people, countered their arguments and challenged them, okay? I have. And Vice didn't do that. Vice just follows them and lets them speak. Okay. Then you had NPR interviewed Jason Kessler, who organized Unite the Right, and the same people attacked them for platforming. No rules. Literally no rules. The mob can snap like that. How do you compete against somebody who doesn't play by any rules? You can't win. I imagine it's like a game of Monopoly, where you're sitting there watching the other side just pull money from the bank, and you're like, hey man, you can't do that. What are you doing? And they say, I can do whatever I want. And you still agree to sit there and play by the rules. And this is what happens. You're going to lose, by the way. This is what happens when you have rules and principles and your opponents do not. They will win by any means necessary, and they have said as much. They're willing to strip the rights of marginalized people so long as their voice doesn't fit their politics. How many conservative minorities have been accused of being white supremacists at this point? Because there's no rules. It's all a big lie. There are good liberals. There is good social justice. I have friends who I would say are feminists and intersectional feminists who are good people. You can be whatever you want. You can even be a communist so long as you're not an authoritarian, as far as I'm concerned. I was in Berkeley during the Ben Shapiro event when the protesters came, and there was a guy wearing a mask with a sickle and hammer on it. And I asked him about authoritarianism, about violence from Antifa, and he condemned all of it, and I was surprised. And I said, you know what? If you believe communism is the right way for the world to work, I disagree with you. But if you think the way you achieve that is by shaking my hand and trying to explain to me things I don't understand, I think we're on each other's side for the most part. I don't think your idea will ever win with the masses. But you are 100% right in how you are going about trying to implement this society. And the reason I say this is because in the past, we have been heavily focused on violence. We have been heavily focused on incivility and restricting expression to win by any means necessary. And through social progress, we have lifted up actual oppressed peoples. People who were told in the past they weren't even human are now able to speak up, be heard, and present their argument. And that is social progress. For the people who want to restrict speech, that is not social progress. But they hide behind justice, they hide behind progress, and they pretend to fight against racism, when in reality, they're some of the most racist people I've ever seen. The other night I'm watching Fox News and Tucker Carlson highlights segments from CNN where they made a bunch of racist statements. And Tucker Carlson said racism is wrong no matter what, and I said, what timeline am I in where, Fox News is the one highlighting racism and getting angry about it? I'm not saying Fox News has always been racist. It's just the cultural perception is that Fox News is this old guard, racist, conservative platform, and CNN is kind of a middle of the road. MSNBC are the good people, but now you have people on CNN saying that, based on the color of your skin, you can or can't do certain things. This is mind-blowing to me. And this is why I think what Mark Kern says is particularly interesting. I don't know if I would ever play this game. I don't know if I would ever violate my principles in a way that would mean I would win the war. There are people who say that the ends justify the means. I don't believe that's true, because you never meet the ends. What I mean by that is, we're not expecting the world to end. There is no point at which you win and everything is over. A lot of people, when they're young, believe that once they achieve their dream, they've done it. They've made it. And then once you've made it, everything's done. What more do you do now? There was a I don't want to name anybody, but a YouTube video about a young woman who freaked out because she achieved her dream of being a massive YouTube star and had a mental breakdown. Because most people think that when you become a YouTube star, for instance, it's done. No more hard work. When in reality, making it to that endpoint, what you perceive as an endpoint, is just one more step in a never-ending staircase, and it only gets harder to climb. Eventually, you're basically climbing a ladder or an inverted wall. It becomes more and more difficult to maintain. There is no point at which we can sit back, put our feet up, and say, we're done. If you believe in a better world, and you want there to be equality and justice, you cannot create that world by using inequality and injustice. And these people believe that's the case. I'll tell you what'll happen. Anybody who is willing to restrict speech, to use violence and incivility against those they disagree with, will never stop using it because there is no end. Perhaps it comes to a point where these people say, we want a revolution, and they're willing to use any means necessary to get it. Finally, they get it. There's a revolution, and now we're a totally socialist country. Well, now the game is on to maintain that socialist country. And they say, well, look, it's once we get rid of the dissent, we've established the commune. Once we get rid of the dissenters, we can stop being violent and we can stop oppressing people. You will never get rid of dissent. So long as you are violent and you oppress people, you will just make more dissenters. And it'll be a never-ending world of pain and suffering. Thus, the only way to bring about a better world is to play on hard mode. And hard mode means there are things I believe in that I wish everyone else believed in. And the only way I will get there is being honest. Even if I believe I will likely lose, I know that there is no winning when you use violence and oppression to achieve your goals. So what does that mean? I will continue to stand up for what I believe in. I will do my best to try and be honest and rational about what's going on in the world in the hopes that other people will be infected with the mind virus of rationality and not illiberalism. I hope that when people who are conservative watch my videos, they say, oh, I never thought about it that way. I disagree, but he's got a point. At least he's being honest and there's hope. When people who are liberal or Democrats watch my videos, they'll say, he's kind of right. In fact, one of my favorite things ever was reading this thread it was a left-wing subreddit, and they were ragging on me, calling me conservative, and the top comment was, I've looked through all his videos, I really don't like how he frames things, but he's not wrong, it's kind of frustrating, and I'm like, there we go! Listen, the truth is always closer to the middle. But I'll just end by saying this. Whatever you want to call the illiberal reactionary left, whatever you want to call the alt-right or whatever, social terrorist, whatever you want to say, the point is, the ends don't justify the means. There is no point at which you get rid of illiberal, reactionary, regressive leftists. If you believe, as someone on the right, that you need to shut these people down, lock them up, or do whatever, you will just create an authoritarian world that justifies this behavior. And that means we're between a rock and a hard place. The best we can hope for is to balance between the extremes, because you're always going to have dissent. From the left, from the right, from the top, from the bottom, whatever it is. These people believe that they have a right to use violence. They will only create a violent world. And they will only create a world where when they use violence, their opposition will say, you know what? If they're using violence, we should use it too. Because that's exactly what they're doing. They're claiming, well, the state uses violence, why can't we? Great. Once they're in power, there's going to be a bunch of people saying, well, they use violence, why can't we? And there we are. Never-ending cycle of humanity. Perhaps one day through technology, we can find better living, and we can maybe be in a peaceful, more democratic, and more equal society because we'll be post-scarcity once technology grants us that position. For the time being, we're not there. And there probably isn't going to be a political solution. But you know what? I could rant on this for a million years. So there you have it. Whether or not you want to call them social terrorists, I thought the idea was interesting. Not so much that he's calling them social terrorists, more so that he's pointing out there's an information civil war. It's not about bullets, it's about ideas. And if you don't fight back, your ideas will cease to exist. Anyway, I'm going to get out of here. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you tomorrow on the main channel at 4.